Welcome in, listeners. This is a pleasure, wonderful, beautiful day to sit back and record a podcast episode. I'm down in Palmetto, Georgia today to be able to sit back and record with one of my friends that I've now known for, I think it's 10, 12 years now, over a decade that we've known each other. His name is Rick Carvlin. Before we always go into it, as you all know, that I like to do my mom's quote of the day. And today's quote comes from Leonard Peltier, and it is, "I don't know how to save the world. I don't have the answers or the answer. I hold no secret knowledge as to how to fix the mistakes of generations past and present. I only know that without compassion and respect for all of the earth's inhabitants, none of us will survive, nor will we deserve to." Great quote, specifically with the topic we're going to hit on today, talking about funding that's lacking right now in the nonprofit sector. So to introduce Rick here for a moment, I'm going to do like a little bio thing that I've kind of pieced together that I love of it, that's fascinating to give you a little bit of knowledge, is speaking with Rick, who is directly involved in all operations for a wide variety of arts organizations, from ballet and modern dance, world-class jazz presentations, opera, regional theater, in symphony orchestra, to major corporate and commercial events. He wears so many hats as a collaborator and facilitator, utilizing his skills, knowledge, and network to help artists achieve their vision and enrich their communities. During the episode, we are going to focus on the major issue that is facing the nonprofit industry right now, which needs way more awareness to it. That is the lack of funding, which is unfortunately causing many organizations to limit their outreach that they previously had done, and some even actually closing the doors as a result. So, Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
More than welcome. I'm sure I could go on a lot more with how much history and knowledge that you have to share with this topic specifically.
No, I've been fortunate, to spend my life around creative people. I've sat in the wings and watched Baryshnikov dance and Ray Charles sing. So this brings you so much joy. And just yesterday, we were having the final performance for Robert Spano at Symphony Hall, doing Mahler's Third Symphony. And the power of those moments when all of those musicians and artists put their efforts together and combine, create such beauty. And you see that there's this possibility, if we all, approached our lives with creativity and with this collaborative mindset, we could achieve so much, and this world would be so much better.
That is beyond true words that spoken into existence over the years with all the projects you've been involved with. Now, how do we know each other from this 10, 12 years now?
Right. Well, many years ago, and of course at Symphony Hall, I believe it was, we started the organization Glow. Laurie Stallings, my partner for 26 years now. She was choreographer. We've worked with a number of dance companies over the years. We created a nonprofit in Chicago that was successful. And then we moved to New York because of my career. She came down here to do a residency with the Atlanta Ballet for 3 years. So we were commuting a lot. I was in New York. She was down here most of the time. And when she finished her time with the ballet, she finished with a big work with members of the hip-hop community, with Big Boy and Sleepy Brown, a lot of people from the Dungeon family. And she was so enraptured by working with the hip-hop community, creating this amazing ballet, she said that she would want to stay here in Atlanta. And, we had been touring for many years. We'd lived in Chicago, Vancouver, we'd lived in Columbus, Ohio, and we'd lived in New York. And through all that time, we never had a chance to have dogs again and, have a yard, living in apartments and being on tour so much. So we decided to start looking at building a life down here. It's close to her parents who are older. And it seemed to work out. She wanted to start her own platform here. And we put the time and energy in within our network to find people that were also of a similar mind. the Alliance Theater and the Atlanta Symphony, the High Museum, they all helped us mount this first production some, I guess, 12, almost 13 years ago, this July. And through that work, it was a big public work, which is kind of our mission. We focus on free to the public work, so people have access. We met so many people, and some funders came forward and said, hey, we would like to sponsor or commission you to create another work, which at that time was the La Flash. And Louis Corrigan, who was a big funder here in the city back then, he put some money behind us to help us out. The Woodruff Arts Center provided space for a lot of our needs, and off we went. The amazing thing, and people asked, especially in the early years, they said, well, do you have auditions? It's like, no, we meet people who come. When you're doing the right things, the right people show up. So it's been really gratifying in that regard. We've met you, your brother, so many amazing people that well as well. And people stick around, it has a sticky quality to it.
Yeah, it's the Glow family, as a lot of us will coin the term over the years. Like, yeah, there's Glow ATL, there's Lori, and there's all these group of people, but every time you go to these events that you're gonna run into this kind of core group, and you may have not seen it for 6 months or a year or two, and out of the blue, you're right, you walk back in and just pick right back up. And it's a team unit, and it's just so magical. And you are never still, like you and Lori just constantly are going around everywhere, but you coordinate it so well.
Well, we do work hard, of course, and as your brother and you can attest, so many people have come to help make the work, make it happen. And while we've started out with a very strong ethic, and that is that, artists' work is valuable, we've always paid our artists. And that was a core founding principle for us. Designers, people that were professionals, we treated them like professionals as we would want to be treated. But we also obviously have benefited from a lot of volunteers that come around and help out. And you can't underestimate the power of that.
That's you can move buildings.
Absolutely.
You can move out of buildings. You can move into buildings.
Yes.
as we have done. So nonprofit is the term here, and a lot of people don't understand what is a nonprofit. Can you give me some information on what defines a nonprofit organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's different from city to city. There are different levels of or classifications for nonprofits. There's the 501c3, which is essentially what we are, the C4. There are, and I'm not sure why, there are political action committees that are also nonprofit, but I won't go there. So the idea is that you're getting a break on your taxes because you're doing a service for the community. And I think that gets lost sometimes in some of the bigger institutions, that you exist because of the community and you are there to serve the community and become an asset for the community. So being nonprofit in Georgia means is a little bit different than some states, where you're tax exempt on things you purchase or things you pay out. Georgia does not give a tax break specifically unless you qualify under some pretty stringent rules. But we are exempt from profit. We are exempt from tax on profit because essentially what we do, we take in money and we spend it on putting programming out to the community. There is no profit margin involved. When the money runs out, the programming, of course, slows down. So we are hand to mouth to a degree. I think probably the biggest misconception people have had over the years is that, you're a nonprofit organization, you get all this funding from the city, from the state, locally. And that was probably true some years ago. And, there are still some, Canada is a good example, where a lot of the organizations do get the bulk of their funding or a significant part from public support. Here in Georgia, Georgia is, I've heard 49th or 50th in per capita funding.
Oh, wow. Out of
for
all
the
the 50
arts.
states, 48th, 49th.
Yes.
I didn't realize we were that low.
We are, I think Mississippi is perhaps a little below us. I could be wrong. And at one point in time, that metric explained that Arizona didn't have public funding for the arts per se. So I don't know where we sit this day, but I've certainly heard that mentioned by a number of people and have read that as well. So it is a challenge here in Georgia, just because of the level of funding that comes from the state, the NEA, major national organizations that fund are less visible here in Georgia, in the South in general. I think that's starting to change, but it is a challenge. And so we spend a good bit of our time trying to identify opportunities for funding. We do a lot of community service work, so at the urging of some of our funders, like the Community Foundation, they said, you're really doing community development work and you need to look at funders that are involved in community development. So to some degree, it's a matter of being aware of what's available out there without necessarily tailoring your programming to fit a funder's priorities. But when you find a funder with priorities that are, consistent with yours, then, it's worthwhile to pursue and see if they're interested in supporting your work.
Well, what goes into obtaining these funds?
Well, grant writing is, what we spend a lot of our time with, grant writing and grant reporting. There are obvious, the city, the county, the state. They are three consistent funders here in the city, in the Atlanta area, in the Georgia region. So they're certainly helpful. They have a number of grant opportunities that you can apply for. The amounts aren't as significant as you'd like to see, but okay. We realize too that their budgets are small, so they try to spread that out. There's a lot of competition for these grants because everybody has a mission, and there's a lot of people doing great work that could use the support. So it's a little bit difficult here. We don't have the history of philanthropy. I think that some of the major cities, and a lot of them, the industrial cities in the north, you've got the Carnegies, the Mellons, the
old
Duke,
money,
the Ford Foundation, all these huge organizations, and a lot of their focus is, of course, in their regions, where their corporations, where their employees are, where their employees' families are, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And you start to see a little bit of that here with the Blank Foundation. The Bloomberg Foundation came down here and supported a lot of work here in Atlanta. The Rauschenberg Foundation. There was a national consortium of funders that formed, it's probably 8 or 9 years ago, called Art Place. And what that was, it was a unique vision and a unique opportunity. They took 5 or 6, perhaps there were more, major foundations like Ford, like Duke, like Mellon, and brought them together to make really significant grants in that, significant being more than 5 figures.
Oh, wow.
300,000 to 400,000 over a period of a couple of years to really make an impact. And primarily they were focused on what they call placemaking. So they would find perhaps an old city center, not unlike what we have here in Palmetto, and they would fund arts-based initiatives that also brought revitalization, to an area, to a city. I don't think there were 2 projects here in Georgia over the 6 or 7 years that ran that were funded once, but nothing significant like they were seeing in some of the major cities in New York, in Michigan, in California. So I think part of that is because we don't have those, historic foundations here in the city. The Blank Foundation is relatively new.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is, yeah.
certainly, doing a lot of good work, a lot of beautiful things. But so many cities have, a plethora of these types of funds and these types of funders. But it's growing. It's growing. And I think, there's reason for hope. We've survived the pandemic, which...
That for a lot of nonprofits has closed so many doors.
Absolutely. And without PPP funding and some SBA emergency loan and so on, we wouldn't have made it. But again, we were able to apply for these funds and receive grants and receive a loan. There's a lot of reporting, a lot of grant writing and reporting that goes into that. That takes a good deal of time, but it's our lifeblood.
What is writing a grant? Because if my brain, and I know some people would be like, oh, do I just write like on these papers? They're like certain questions. What's a format for writing a grant?
Well, here's another challenge, and being in this field for my entire career, what I've always wondered is why we can't create a centralized system for application and reporting, whereas you would take all of your basic data that every grantor, every significant grantor asks for, whether it's financial data, it's demographics, it's programmatic, all of these things that are measured, that are used to measure your organization, your effectiveness, et cetera. If we could centralize how we feed our information into a database and then report into a structured database as well, rather than creating something new to fit the needs of each particular funder, we could probably eliminate a lot of the back work that has to go into a nonprofit organization. Not to put grant writers out of out of business by any means, because they're amazing people that do incredible work. But I think we could simplify the system, at least in most of the government agencies. I know that the DeVos Institute, which is Michael Kaiser, he started some years ago. They're about teaching nonprofits how to manage. And it's a really deeply involved process built around a model that applies to almost all organizations.
Okay.
So with that, they had a program from, I think it was SMU at the time, and now I think it's in Maryland, but a system called Data Arts, where you would upload all of your information so they could compile it and do some reporting on a national level. But why can't we create that for funders, where they can go, like GuideStar, you can go and see, I can read the 990 of an organization, see their tax report, see how they're spending their money. But to take a deeper look into the organization, all of this information that we have to garner and then input, it could save a lot of time for everybody.
Maybe this is a time for some of the organizations like LinkedIn or something to maybe step in to get that rebirth of programs like this, because of, as you said, you spend hours and hours creating for each individual one, and they can be able to, you can find them and they can be able to find you at that same time.
You know, there are, like the Community Foundation will do that to a degree. They'll do a little bit of, I guess for lack of a better term, you could call matchmaking. You know, and we work with an organization, a fairly new organization here in town called Purpose Possible. And it's a number of nonprofit professionals who got together to create some sort of mentoring to help people with grant writing, with reporting, et cetera. And so we participated. I mean, it is a contracted service. There is a cost to it, but I think it's a valuable start. Some years ago, Ian Dennington and I, Flux, we gathered some people together for what we called the United Arts Front, and we had at one point probably 20 to 25 people participating.
Oh, wow.
On a monthly basis. And it was just a round table to talk about ideas. And, through these, of course, information's passed. So you learn of opportunities that are out there that you might not otherwise hear about. So there is some of that going on. I would say, too, there are some individuals, that have really done amazing things for the city. Again, Louis Corrigan, who supported so many organizations. At one point, he was funding more arts organizations to a higher degree than the city.
Oh, my word.
So that generosity and that vision certainly helped us, Glow, survive for a long time. There are, of course, many others. Look at Anthony Harper at the Goat Farm. What he has done for the arts organization, I know you've been there many times. The connections that have been made there, the sense of community that they created there, the sense of possibility.
It was endless. It was amazing seeing the stuff that was coming out of there for 10 plus years.
Yeah. So, of course, the renovation that's ongoing now there, we're homeless to a degree. We don't have that studio space that we used to have. But we've also, benefited from our relationship with the Symphony and others. Gallery 992 on the west side has been a beautiful relationship. We've met amazing people. And through this collision of movement and music, we'll build a relationship with Jazz at Lincoln Center and bring some of their programming down here. That's the beauty of working in these communities with these creative people. These possibilities arise from just that interaction.
Yeah, the keyword there, community. Like, that's the cool thing when you look at the arts. It's a big community in order to make everybody work.
Well, and two, I think what people miss, you look at a city like New Orleans. What do you think of when you think of
jazz and blues and that come out of it?
Right. There are so many cities you think of when you hear the name of the city. There's something very descriptive or identifiable about that city. Whether it's it's LA, it's Hollywood. It's New York, it's Broadway. As you say, jazz down in New Orleans. And what people don't realize is that the creative culture is really what creates the identity of a city.
Yes.
What makes a city different from any other? I spent many years on tour throughout the country and throughout the world. And so oftentimes you could be anywhere in the United States. You're off exit so-and-so, and there's your hotel, there's an Applebee's, there's this, there's that.
Yeah.
But the artists, that are endemic to that community really speak more about the city than any other major corporation. When you drive into the Pittsburgh area around here and you see a mural,
oh yes,
immediately it tells you something about that town, right? You hear the music on the street, it tells you something about that sound. You smell the food, in a Greek or an Italian neighborhood, something right away. It has identity.
Yep.
So the same is true of art. It gives a community, it gives a city something to be proud of. I mean, look at hip hop in Atlanta.
Oh my gosh, how that blew up
and
entirely.
Why is that not? When people think of Atlanta, they should be thinking of hip hop, and they should be thinking of all the other artists that come from here. Because, as you know, I know you're an avid you're avid followers. There's amazing things going on here,
and it gets overlooked. Like going into shows, you may see 20 people in an audience of this musician that came from around the world to be able to play in the city of Atlanta. Because if there was somebody that they came to meet or someone that they wanted to specifically talk to collaborate something for the future.
And two, when we started out here early on, Laurie and I sat down and they said, well, we talked about what would draw us, why would we stay in Atlanta? Because we'd been here on and off for a couple of years. She had been here most of the time, and I was more of a visitor. And I had been here in the past to work. So I was familiar with the city, but we said that we decided that we wanted to create the type of art scene, for lack of a better term, that's a terrible term, but we wanted to create that the things we wanted to see in the city. I mean, you go to New York, you go to the Joyce, any time of the year, you can always see something at the Joyce Theater.
Okay, yeah.
You can always go down to, the Lower East Side or 92nd Street Y, and the type of programming you're going to see to a degree, and be surprised sometimes. And I think the Goat Farm was that.
It did provide that for a
years.
lot of people for many years, yes.
And our hope is that continues, that through this renovation, that, the heart and soul, Anthony's vision and his passion, I think really are probably the most promising thing for the arts in the city right now. You would want to see more leadership politically, and I'm not taking a shot at any politicians. I know there are so many things on their plate, and there are so many issues we have in this city and in the country, in the world in general. But this focus on community, like those 150 people on stage, for Mahler, almost 200 people, that power, that's indescribable.
This change in the pandemic, have you noticed that has affected funding in a negative or positive way in the nonprofit worlds?
I mean, it's a good question. We wouldn't have survived without the funding we got through PPP.
What is the PPE?
Paycheck Protection Program. That was federal funding through the Rescue Plan Act. And the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funds, became available to Fulton County Community Development. So we got some funding there for some of our programming. And through Elevate here in Atlanta. So those federal funds really did hit home and really did help a lot of organizations support themselves through. And we were committed to our artists. We have a small group of artists, key artists that are with us. I say full time, but I mean, they're with us throughout the year. We don't have the funds to pay, a livable yearly salary. So it's a number of hours a week. We allocate as best we can to keep people employed. At the outset of the pandemic, we saw the need and we knew we had a network and skills. We started sewing masks. At the very beginning, hospitals were without a PPE. So we learned and started sewing. I probably sewed 600 or 700. And
wow.
The people within our organization sewed hundreds. And they would take them to the hospitals, to the veterinary clinics, to the fire stations, to retirement homes. So, we knew that we needed to step up. We're a community service.
Keyword there, community. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that commitment, and then Laurie had an idea to create these, what we call play kits. And that's just it's a handmade bag that actually her mother sews by hand. And in each of those, we have different artwork that was created by our artists and their children, and then materials to make, replicate, or expand on those ideas, whether it's paints or crayons or a handmade journal and some inspiration in there as well from other artists. And we started putting these together for kids who were separated from their schools.
Oh, yeah.
We knew they were out.
Long periods of time.
Yeah, and we wanted to see them, at least have something to touch and something to inspire them. And we went to Fulton County, the Community Development Department, and we got, for us, a major grant to help, and the ARPA funds helped us deliver, I think, over 5,000 of these play kits.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was artists going door to door through communities, all throughout this community, to community centers, to schools where it was safe and possible. So it really made you see the needs out there and feel like you were doing something important, something that made a difference.
That's the thing, making a difference in your community, building that that as well, when that connection, as with say the Glow family, is now that you've been inside someone's home and dropped something off or created that touch, it also makes that kindness, that awareness that things are still out there for people, that people still do care. Because of the rates of suicides and depression went heavily up during the time period. And one tiny little bit of joy can spark a whole revolution.
Absolutely, and inspire more works of empathy, more works of generosity. That's what you hope for. I mean, that's the goal. That's why you do the work, you know?
Now, you were mentioning that there was that federal relief program that came in. Have you noticed from shifting between whenever there's a new election, there's new people that come in, is nonprofits thought about, in the beginning, whenever we're trying to make some impact and we're trying to bring attention to our candidacy, and does that drop off as time goes on, or is it kind of something that continues? So I guess the question is, are nonprofits an afterthought at times when it comes to funding?
Well, I mean, of course, and to some degree you understand that. You understand that there are other needs in the community. There's a lot of need out there. You know, your job, our job, I should say, is to find those areas where you can apply for funding that's available and then use that funding to do something impactful. This past election cycle with the mayor and city council, you know, Doug Shipman, the new president of the city council, of course, he was the CEO of the Woodruff for a period of time and the Center for Civil and Human Rights. So I know a lot of people in the arts community rallied around him because he understands. He has firsthand knowledge of a lot of the things we face. Now, some would say, you know, the Woodruff is in a different category because it is a large institution and has significant funders. But, you know, with partnerships with the different constituents in the Woodruff Arts Center, the Alliance, the High, the Symphony, you can leverage those relationships for greater exposure, and greater exposure brings, hopefully, better funding, you know, greater funding. So while that is a bit of a vacuum, and I've heard this again, you know, in our roundtable discussions, people say, well, everybody thinks if I write a check to the Woodruff Arts Center, I'm supporting the arts. So I don't need to reach out beyond that. And I'm sure there is some truth in that, but the reality is if people are consistently supporting and attending what's going on at the Woodruff Arts Center, then they are at least coming into contact with or being made aware of the other organizations that are out there. So.
Yeah, and is there any pieces of legislation or anything out there that maybe people should be aware of to maybe try to contact their local congressman or representative or anything, or state or federal level or local?
I wish I could say I was more aware. I am a bit of a political junkie. You know, I do follow politics pretty closely, kind of passionate about that. And I know, like, on city council again, Liliana Bakhtiari was a big supporter, is a big supporter of the arts. Am I up to date on major initiatives? I'm not. Do I think there's something out there I'm missing? I wish that were the case. I don't believe, because I read a local paper every day. I think that's, to some degree, we all rely too heavily on national news. And so we lose track of what's going on right around us. And so I've recommitted myself for years. I read a daily paper every day, and now for the last few years, I've recommitted to doing that so I can at least keep abreast of what's being published there. And hopefully that gives me an idea of what's going on in town. We've lost, well, we don't really see a lot of the different media out there that are available to the arts to publicize their work and get the word out. Social media is everything these days. And if you don't have social media presence, you don't exist to some degree.
Which is unfortunate.
It really is. And, you know, there's a lot of great things.
Oh, yeah, there is. There's positive and negatives, but some people completely overlook you because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. People will look to their social media to find out what's going on around town because there aren't that many other options. I mean, where else do you look? If you're reading the paper, but we all know that, you know, readership is
At the all-time low. Yeah, it's all-time low.
So, you'd love to see people return to the local. You'd love to see more people supporting and listening to WABE. I support NPR. It's not a lot of money, but I know that they're here doing the good work. So, if I can't support the nonprofits I see that are being effective, then I can't expect others to support us. So, try to set that example with the young people that work with me. I try to really encourage them to be cognizant of what's going on politically and be involved in the voting process. It's easy to get sarcastic. It's easy to get dismissive of the political process. But that's our tool. That's what we have. And if more people got involved, I think I was reading the other day that participation in the preliminary elections in the primaries in California, which is, I know that's not a very high value event for some people, but that you're only getting 20 to 30% participating in voting.
Oh my gosh, that's atrocious.
Certainly in a presidential election, that number changes quite a bit, but pay attention to the midterms, pay attention to the primaries, pay attention to what's going on around you and be involved in whatever way you can. I mean, I support some national candidates. Again, it's $20 here, it's $50 there when I can afford it.
But it adds up.
But it adds up,
Yeah.
It does. And they say put your money where your mouth is. Well, if somebody's out there working for the things I think are valuable, I'll do my best to support it.
One thing that I know some people don't understand is whenever they're donating money and putting in this organization, where does that money kind of go? Because there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that happens.
There is. And when you look at a large institution, you see, there's a development department, there's a marketing department, there's a sales department, which you would think is the same, but it's not always. There's an artistic department. There might be the technical fields. You might have a scene shop. You might have a costume shop. All of these crafts, all of these people that are doing amazing work, very important to the final product. And maybe part of the problem with the way the world is today, and we've seen this in the past with mentorships on community development of nonprofits. Here's how you build a nonprofit. Here's how you manage a nonprofit. Well, we're not looking to build an institution. I mean, we're a very small, vibrant, committed organization, but to follow the same pathways that a major symphony or a ballet company does to try to replicate their model, it's nonsensical for us. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we aspired to be, a major ballet company, that's a different pathway. But to be in social practice and to be in the public forum, providing art services and experiences to people, we don't need all of that. Perhaps we would benefit, and we've had a lot of internal discussions when you're doing a new strategic plan, which we just completed one. You look at the challenges and what could bring your organization up to a higher level of funding, and oftentimes it's investing in that infrastructure, that human resource, because we're run a little ragged. But at the same time, we're committed to supporting artists. I have another job, a full-time job, that pays enough to support us. And so I volunteer my time. We've had a number of other people, board members, et cetera, who volunteer in some of the administrative tasks, and of course, people like you that volunteer in the nuts and bolts of really putting something together. It's really important, but our primary focus is keeping these artists funded, keep their dreams alive, so they carry it forward, for us. Hopefully the time comes, when this organization, after 13 years, you think, here we are, we're viable, we're a thing, we're an institution, but we're not. It could go away tomorrow. A former board member, a friend of mine, John Gibson, I don't know if you know him, but he said to me one time, he and I went to a Davos mentorship program in Washington, D.C. at the Kennedy Center. And again, it was really powerful. And perhaps one of the great things about a gathering like that is you realize how many people are in your shoes too.
Oh, yes. Oh, my word. So, humbling. Yeah.
Yeah. It's humbling, but it's also heartening to know that you're not the only one.
True.
Like with Rauschenberg, when they brought all these small organizations together. From Atlanta, they chose 5 or 6 organizations, and then from other cities like Kansas City and so on. And then they'd bring us together, once a year to spend a week together, or the better part of a week. And it was fascinating. I still have connections from those times, of those people. So it's important to remember, again, what John said at one point to me while we were going through this process of planning. He said, here you are, you've been together as an organization for 4 or 5 years. He said, you think you're at the beginning of the middle of your time, but you're really in the middle of the beginning.
I like that.
And
I love that.
That was very powerful. I'd like to think we were starting to get to the middle. I'd say COVID probably pulled us back a little bit. But we've rebuilt our board with help from mentorship through Davos, through the AIM program with Bloomberg. And that's been really valuable. That's been very helpful. So I think we're getting back to the beginning of the middle, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, that's very true. And you never can tell where you're at or where things are going in the near future. And tomorrow, something may pop up on your front door and completely change everything. You never can tell. Now, we're seeing a lot right now in the world. Tax things are starting to kind of start change. And does tax reform and tax additions and stuff, does that affect the nonprofit world in ways?
I wish I was more conversant on that. Certainly, there is some pushback on tax write-off for nonprofit contributions. But I'm hopeful that remains to be the norm, that people are rewarded for their participation in funding arts organizations. Again, I would question, that political action committees are nonprofit, or that some other organizations that push for political change should perhaps not be as well protected by the tax code. And there are a number that come to mind that I won't mention. But I hope as a country that maybe through COVID that we're turning a corner. You see with recent things that have happened in the world, in our cities, in our small towns. Of course, there's so many that are really disturbing, but perhaps we're getting to a point of momentum.
Okay.
That the pendulum will have to begin swinging back the other way, towards empathy, towards community, towards peace, towards a better environment. So many decisions are made, and we're all to some degree guilty of it, but everybody makes a decision based, I say everybody, too many people make a decision based on solely the dollar value. It can't be the only thing that we consider when we make decisions. And the same goes with funding. There are a lot of priorities out there, but there are also a lot of needs that aren't being addressed. And I think arts organizations, nonprofits, in the end, need to really embrace the fact that they are community-based organizations. They are an asset of the community. They owe a service to the community. And I think that will be reciprocated when people approach their communities with passion, with creativity, with empathy. They listen with listening. I think it will change the world, and people will will reciprocate. And that's where the synergy comes from, that creates a better world.
I love that. The words they use in there specifically that went right to my ears was listen. If we listen to each other, create a conversation, it goes a long way of opening doors that maybe you've never thought about, because if everyone here has something different to say, have something more to bring to the table, and if we just sit and listen, it could create a long thing. Even if you may disagree with them at some points, they can be able to help you understand another person's side, or they can be able to understand as well a different perspective that, as I mentioned earlier, you never thought about before. And if you don't start the conversation, you never know where it can go.
Absolutely. And this is probably, one of the greatest lessons I've learned from being around Laurie for so long. She's so passionate. She works harder than anybody I think I've ever met.
I don't think I've ever sort of stay still.
She doesn't. She's constantly working, and with such deep intention, but listening, that patience to listen. And that drives her work. When we go into a town, we've done what we call the traveling show for many years, where we go into a town and do programming in the schools and the public movement-based installations and in the community centers. The first thing she'll do, she goes in and she just spends time just sitting in a park or in the local coffee shop, not talking to people, just feeling the space. When she went into the High Museum, into a 45,000 square foot exhibition hall, she spent days just sitting in the space, observing and listening. And I would like to say I'm as guilty of that level of patience and understanding. Someday perhaps I will be.
That is a goal to work towards indeed as well. Too many times we speak before we listen.
Yes. And I've been speaking a lot, sorry.
No, it's a good thing. You're bringing awareness, you bring understanding and knowledge to what's going on. That's the whole point, is I'm learning from friends, and our friends here are learning as well. And you're sharing this knowledge and we're listening. So this is your time.
Very much appreciated.
Is there any, like that was a whole bunch of lovely knowledge there for that, right? Is there anything that I haven't brought up that you would like to discuss, or any other words of wisdom that you'd like to drop on us here?
Look around your community, see what's going on. Know the people. And this sounds like, the old man talking about walking up hill to school, in the snow, 3 miles.
Ways.
Yeah, right. Right. We've all heard that. But, growing up and knowing everybody in your neighborhood, knowing your community, I'm not as adept at that, or I've not practiced it as much as I'd like to. Again, Laurie and her artists have been door to door in every neighborhood in Palmetto through this program, and other towns as well. But, knowing what's going on around you. So when we drive down the street, she'll say, "Oh, there's so-and-so sitting on her porch," and she waves.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's such a beauty to that, being on YouTube, being, attached to your phone and social media. Yes, you're more cognizant of what's going on around the world, but like texting while you're driving, you're less aware of what's right in front of you and right beside you. Yeah. And that's what you really need to do.
You're looking at the forest from above, but you're missing the individual trees itself that make that forest work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Rick, thank you for coming on and sharing your time with us, bringing me into your home and spending time with your dogs. Yeah. And it's phenomenal to be able to have this today.
They may have made a few comments during this.
But you know what? It was very, very adding on to the conversation that we needed. We all needed that. And it brought tranquility and pause to the room as well, which we needed.
Much appreciated.
If someone wanted to reach out to you, ask maybe a question or thing of advice, how could they do so?
I guess the easiest way is Rick, R-I-C-K, at gloatl.org. I'm always interested in hearing people's ideas, always looking for collaborations. People come to us with amazing things. And again, as I said earlier, because Laurie does the work she does with the art she does, people will call us and ask us, if we're interested in something. And I say, always call. If you don't ask, you'll never know.
That's very true.
And if you have a question that I can offer some advice for or some assistance, reach out in my network to help something out. I think that's always what I'm looking for. So please, always feel free to reach out.
Now with organization like Glow itself, right now, say I've heard a lot from this podcast, I've heard Glow pop up a lot. If I wanted to contribute or donate in some way, how could I do so?
Yeah, always. I mean, there's, of course, and I appreciate the question because, we're always looking for help. And I know you guys have supported us both with money and with time. I would say go to our website. There's always, you'll learn more about the organization. Laurie spends a lot of time on the messaging. We don't have a marketing person. We don't have a development person. We have some people that help with the technical issues on our website. We don't have a social media person. What you see on social media is Laurie. You're seeing her voice. You're seeing what she's seeing and what matters to her. So I'd say go on social media, go on the website. Obviously, come to see the work. We'll be in Symphony Hall in July from the 6th through the 20th doing our people shops. And this is a summer of workshops where you just come in. You can be any age. You can be any physical ability. Come in to Symphony Hall stage and work with the dancers. Well, I say dancers, moving artists. Work with the musicians that are there. It's a special thing. Or go to the website, glowatl.org.
I'll make sure the link is in the bottom of the description.
Yeah, there's always a donate button there. We certainly appreciate support, but come be a part of the work. I think that's the most valuable thing. Because if you have the means and the work touches you and you can support it, that's great. Or you can bring other people to it. I mean, that's really what it is. It's building that community.
And helping it grow. That's the more the merrier in that ways to it. It leads to a lot more joy that can be brought in. It really does. Again, thanks, Rick, for sharing your time with us. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Until next time, I'm hoping to see you tomorrow for the seed sowing that is in Atlanta. So as we all like to leave out, you all know that I have my little catchphrases and stuff to lead out with. My name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide from Learning from Friends. Most of all, as you leave today, don't forget, just let your curiosity fly high.